Welcome to the thought room.
If anyone knew what has transpired in this previous hour before we turn these mics on, OMG.
Yeah, definitely. I think, looking at the clock, we were scheduled to start about an hour and 15 minutes ago.
But Spirit had other ideas.
Spirit had other ideas. Do you want to share any of what your experience was walking into my home?
Okay. My experience was walking up your 3 flights of stairs to get here and needing at the last tier of stairs to pause and take a break. And in the exact moment that I was just feeling the exhaustion that I have really been being taught by the last month as I was in that teaching moment yet again, and pausing and breathing. Your partner, Judd, comes around the corner and I look up and he's there and he catches me in this moment of exhaustion.
Yeah.
He's like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just taking a moment to regain some strength." And he's like, "Okay." And so I walked up to the top of the stairs, and when we went to hug, I had my little drink. And again, due to ungroundedness and exhaustion, dropped the drink, and we both get splattered by the drink.
I didn't know that part.
And I'm like, "Oh," and he's like, "Oh no, that was totally my bad." And I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure I played a part in that, you know?" And so we had that funny little exchange. And because we had all been together last night doing the medicinal acro yoga, thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Who facilitated that, Judd said, because he had noticed my neck had been an issue last night, and he said, "Hey, if you want to take a moment before you guys drop in, I can get back into that neck." And I was like, "Okay." And so, it just began this fluid, powerful, unexpected journey. One, I didn't know he was going to be here, and then I also didn't know that what happened was going to take place before the podcast because he was walking down the stairs. Yeah. So I figured it would happen after.
He was like taking the recycling out.
Okay.
Like about to leave, but yeah.
Okay. So then he comes back up, and then, what ensued was this, 45-minute, I still don't even know. I have never, my experience with Judd is 2 hugs, no, maybe 3, saying hello, and then no talking and energetics.
Yeah.
So I still have 0 clue what he does for a living.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of healer he is. All I know is I was just laying on your floor for 45 minutes, going through a journey and extracting pebbles, dark pebbles, and then talking with you, downloading with you, integrating afterwards. And now here we are.
Yeah. Magical. I mean, he's a bit of a incognito healer. Very few people know that about him because he shows up he's this big tattooed guy from Tennessee with a shaved head. He doesn't look like he'd be as tender and present as he is, but that certainly is. He's profound in his own right. So I'm so glad that you got to experience that for sure. Here we are. I'm still reeling because I was having my own meditation and emotional experience outside while you guys were working. And like I said to you before we hit record, my intention is just to kind of throw all the plans out the window and be here together. But just briefly, I'll intro who you are, or maybe not who you are, because it feels like probably things you've done. Right? Like a resume, but I'll give the resume anyway, but it's so much deeper than that. And the first time I actually came across your name was before you ever with Luke. Actually, I don't know if I shared this with you, because when I was living in New York, and you were for a long while too, before I ever had the thought room or anything like that, people kept talking about you, saying, "There's this woman, Alyson Charles. She goes by the name of Rockstar Shaman." And I was like, "That's cool. That's a cool name." And so eventually I'd like to go into that. Is that something you identify with anymore in that name, or have you shifted around that? But so when I first came across your name, you were Rockstar Shaman. You have, you've done so many things that society would call successful and prestigious. You've hosted a daytime national, TV spot, radio shows. You've written a book, which we'll get into later. And you've just done so many incredible things. You've been featured in New York Times, National Geographic. There was a little write-up on you in Oprah magazine, Marie Claire. So very, very impressive. But beyond that, you've done a lot of work with various indigenous groups. You've sat in an immense amount of ceremonies of all types. And
every day, all the time,
for large groups of people. Well, life is a ceremony, right? But so this is where I kind of want to kick off, is just touching on a little bit of your trajectory. I read, I think it was on your website, that you were sort of initiated into this idea of shamanism through a traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't really say what the traumatic event was.
Dun, dun, dun.
So I'm going to turn it over to you, and wherever feels natural for you to breathe into and drop into, given the immensity of your story, we could really go anywhere, but I want you to just kind of touch in with your heart and give us a little taste of what your trajectory has been to get you to this moment where you're sitting on my kitchen floor with me recording this podcast.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Feel a new way is trying to come in. So just give me a second. Mm. So I believe we'll begin. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much new birthing. And so it's like, I really want to give the space for this new way of starting this interview to present. And it's like coming from the world of, I was a radio host for many years and TV host. I know that never have dead air, but it's like, I need to honor. So just give me another moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took me to my first radio job in Florida. So I don't know, it's like a weird starting point, because it's like, it's not the beginning. It's not the childhood wounding beginning trajectory. Right. It's also not my spiritual awakening moment. It's like nestled in the middle. So I'm like, okay, we're just going to start in the middle here, which I've never started at, but
yeah, cool.
Let's just do that. So yeah, my journey here has just been so astounding. It's been all the things, right? It's been the allness. It's been mind-blowingly miraculous. It's been treacherous. It's been anguishing. It's been the most honoring and reverent. And yeah, I remember when I got that first radio job, I had just graduated college. I went to the University of Alabama, and growing up, my family always vacationed in Florida, and I had grandparents who lived in Miami. So there was that thing from childhood, is like, no matter what, at some point I'm going to move to Florida. And so after college I did, and didn't have anything lined up, just moved. And I was the head personal trainer at this gym in downtown Orlando. Yeah, I used to be a personal trainer. I actually did it for many years. And while I was doing that, one of my clients who I trained, he said, you should be my radio show co-host. And I had always known, also since childhood, that media was a thing. But because of my athletic background, I thought I would be, I don't know if you're too young to know who Hannah Storm is. Yeah, it's a bit of an OG name, but she was like the first female sports broadcaster, and she was a badass at it. And so I just assumed, because I was this former national champion distance runner and all of that would be the media piece. Right. And yet this other way started to present. My first job in radio was AM talk. And yet, this the time when I got into the studio, I just knew that this was a big piece of my truth.
How old were you?
So I was just out of college. I was probably 23, something like that. Yeah. And that was a big moment for me because right before that, I really was being presented with the reality that that old identity as an athlete was crumbling. My body was crumbling. My knees, I'd had surgery, a femoral stress fracture, like major injuries because I started so young before I was 3. And so by the time I had run on scholarship through college, my body had already been running for 20 years at that point.
You started running or training when you were 3?
I was in a road race at 2.5 years old, Hallie.
What?
Yes. And there's pictures like
I could probably barely walk.
Some people ask her like, do our kids even walking at 2 now?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a very literal quick start, like hit the ground running.
Yes. Yes. And, it pinged me back to when Jed said something in my session about, me being in the public eye lately. And I was like, no, I was born into it because literally I was born on New Year's Day. So my name was in the newspaper the day I incarnated on Earth.
This is your destiny.
I guess so. Yes. Yeah. And it's been a really wild destiny trajectory and all the iterations of what that is, how, in terms of, what does being in the public eye mean? How is it taking shape and form now? How am I relating to it now? How am I relating to it now? How is it changing? I mean, but that piece, it literally, the second I pinged into the earth realm, I was in the media and in the public eye.
Yeah.
And so now I'm understanding this weird mid-starting point because that has been the through line of all these variations of me. And that's my favorite thing to teach about. It's my favorite thing to embody is infinite evolution, and so even through my total devotion to infinite evolution, that has been the one thread that has always been a mainstay. It's very interesting. So yes, the old identity was crumbling. I was starting to question who I really am. If my body can no longer run, what does that mean? Got into the radio studio, knew a true part of me was coming alive. And it traversed me through. I was a hip hop morning show host for another radio station for many years. Making club appearances.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
What did that look like? Like walk me into the image of,
oh God. It looked like this. It looked like getting up at 3 a.m. Every single weekday for years. That never felt good to me. 3 a.m. is a tough wake up call.
Yeah.
So even though I did it for 3.5, 4 years, there was never a single morning when that alarm went off at 3 a.m. where I was like, I'm ready to go. It was a grind.
Right.
It was tough. And then getting to the studio, I would write the hip hop and Hollywood news headlines. I would get prepped on all of the Hollywood gossip for the day and get into the radio studio with my co-host. And God, our show was like a 3.5 hour long morning show. It was it was a mixture. We would play songs, but it was a lot of us talking and playing mindless morning show games, doing a lot of celebrity interviews, me reading those headlines. And that was this is a cool little dance we're doing because now I'm realizing that point was another one of those more mild awakenings. How when my body started to break down, that was a mild awakening. And then in the radio studio, look, don't get me wrong. It was a fun ass job.
Right.
It was fun. I was in my low 20s and had the energy to do this because I was also a Division I coach at the same time.
Wow.
That's
big.
I almost drove myself to a hospital in the midst of a mental breakdown at that stage. I have always had a high battery, and can do a lot, but getting up at 3 a.m., tapping into all those energetics, and creative energies and waking a city of millions of people up every morning, having to be on. There's no choice but to be on.
Right.
You can't host a morning show and be in a shitty mood and like be tired.
Right.
So I would pound, even though I knew a lot of things. I had grown up in the world of health and wellness. My father owned fitness centers, and I started running at a young age, was getting acupuncture and hypnotherapy at like 6, 7 years old. So I knew health and wellness like the back of my hand, but I also was chugging like those triple diet rock stars, like the giant cans.
Wow.
I would chug those in the morning to be that
Alert
radio
enough.
host.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was in that many-year journey where I started to realize, wow, you're reaching millions of people, but what are you saying and what are you doing? The fun factor of it started to wane. And I started to realize the social irresponsibility of it all. And it made me start to wake up and think, if you are going to be this media personality, let's maybe deliver something of greater substance. So that's when I wanted to leave radio, get more into television. And I was really calling in a show that I could host that was more wellness based. And this was many, many, many years ago. I mean, I'm 42 at this point. So I was a lot ahead of the time. It's only been recently where like consciousness and wellness subjects in the media have gotten like cool or, so anyways, I moved to New York City and was working in TV production for many years while auditioning. So again, another pretty gnarly grind. I was living in Connecticut with my ex-fiance who was the instrument for my awakening, and commuting on a train into Grand Central train station, taking the subway down to Soho to the TV production company I worked at, and also auditioning in the mix, and then got that national daytime television talk show job that was wellness centric. It was called The Juice. And yes, we had actors and celebs and, famous chefs on to cook in our kitchen portion of our studio. But no matter what, even if we were interviewing an actor in the living room part of the set and they were promoting their show, the questions we would always make sure, producers make sure that there's some wellness factor woven in. Right. So it was pretty cool, to see that come to life, because it's a pretty rare experience to have. Anyone who knows anything about TV, it's a wild world, and you can pitch and develop like 30 shows and none of them will ever see the light of day. And so to even be on a show that actually made it to air and got the budget and funding to create a set and pay all the hosts, and just, it's a big deal to even arrive there. So that was a really beautiful chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You touched on it for just a second, but you talked about your ex-fiance, and I like the phrase, he was an instrument for my awakening. That sounds like a very integrated phrase to choose, because I'm sure I can feel that whatever occurred there in that relationship. I mean, I don't want to project here, but my intuitive sense is that it was deeply challenging at times and very painful. Are you willing to share about that piece and how you now have come to the place of being like, that was an instrument for my awakening?
Yeah. It does feel good to put it that way. And it's like a very embodied thing to say it too. Like, I wish him well to this day. I have no idea where he's at, how he's doing, but genuinely pray for his healing and wholeness. And he was definitely one of my greatest karmic teachers this lifetime, no doubt. And we went on a over 16-year journey together. Wow. Yeah, it was a biggie. We were both athletes at Alabama, and that's where it began. And, I was so far from being awakened to the truth of who I am and this earth walk and all of this. And I was still in so much wounding and pain body when we met. That was the system that we embarked in our relationship from, was codependence and denial. And, so through those 16 and a half years, it was pretty much in a nutshell, increasing anguish, increasing suffering, increasing levels and varying degrees of abuse, increasing awarenesses, but still denials around various addictions. It was just getting harder and harder, uglier and uglier, darker and darker, more and more scary, painful. And simultaneously, it was like I was stuffing down harder and harder the truth in me that was trying harder and harder to emerge. So there was all these just freaking challenging energetic systems all hitting up against each other, combating each other. They contributed to me feeling so lost, so confused. Didn't know. I literally remember, especially the last couple of years, not knowing up from down. I didn't know left from right. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I didn't know. I just didn't know. I was lost.
Like, what is that? Tell us more about that, because I think I know that what you're talking about, that feeling of like utter existential disorientation. But like, tell me about the day-to-day, like embodied experience of that.
Gosh, yeah. Okay. I'm like going back. It was the embodied experience of that was doing work that I knew I shouldn't be doing, but it would be the work that would allow him to feel happy and safe and allow our relationship to quote unquote be happy and safe, although it was never those two things truly. It showed up as me experiencing heightened anxiety disorders and getting on prescriptions and having a lot of autoimmune disorders showing up. It revealed as allowing treatment of me that was just so dishonoring, some of which I didn't let myself even acknowledge or see until quite a long time after I finally truly released myself from that karmic journey with him. And that piece that I was too scared to look at was me letting my physical body be dishonored sexually,
right,
the whole time, essentially.
Right.
I mean, I was never taught and never really understood, like, well, what are healthy dynamics sexually, and what does it mean to be in a sacred, honoring relationship and union sexually? Like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? How is your body treated? How is your spirit and soul viewed and held and treated? And I also was in staunch denial of, and again, I just share this in sacred space, but, he was battling very clearly, in my perspective, sexual addictions.
Right.
And so I was in total denial of that. So that was one of the scarier pieces to really acknowledge. And like I said, it took me until after I got out of that relationship. And the way I got out was through divine intervention and simultaneous spiritual awakening moment. And then it was, probably at least a year or two minimum after having my awakening and getting out, that I even was at a place of soul readiness and human readiness to really look at, wow, that was some dark and scary stuff. And it was very scary for me, specifically the sexual addiction piece was so scary for me to look at. Those energies felt really lurky and dark and gremlin-y. And I see like dark figures. And there was something that felt especially icky and terrifying to me about that body energetic exchange.
Yes.
And that was an area that took me a very slow moving and yet steadfast and a lot of brave willingness to like keep looking into, to heal and like really see all I needed to see around that.
This is great. I think this is definitely something we can go into, because I also have a long healing journey with that, and the sexual exchange and what we're taught about our bodies, or more so what we're not taught about our bodies, and ways to honor them. But I'm curious if you can just like slow everything down for us, and if you're willing to talk about that moment where you cite divine intervention and breaking free, and what that experience really was for you. How did that all go down? How exactly did you get out? And what was that catalyst for you waking up?
Yeah, it's interesting because there were times that I attempted and quote unquote tried to get out at different times in the relationship, starting back when we were still in college. There were, there was a situation, because we were both athletes, where because of the sport he played in, he could have gotten drafted, and due to injuries that didn't happen. And through him enduring that, there were some very big red flags that revealed in terms of like lack of coping skills and mechanisms. And when he was in that level of pain, heading towards destructive patterns like drinking and things like that. And I did end things, because I heard that deeper and higher part of myself said, like, Alyson, if this is how he deals with hardship through this experience, and if you're planning to live the rest of your life with him and start a family, there's going to be that life brings, it's the allness. And so there's going to be continued waves and devastations. And if this is the route he leans into, every single hardship, what a effing disaster of a life journey you guys are going to have. Right. So I exited out that time. And then there was another time, where we called the engagement off. And that's when I moved to New York City by myself. And it culminated to this moment, because after the engagement was called off, many months had passed. And the last attempt at making that previous relationship a go came, I think, about 7 months later. He reappeared having what seemed to be some pretty come to Jesus moments, and saying things that I'd never in the 16 years ever heard him saying.
Like what?
Like just taking a little bit of responsibility, and like saying things to me that actually felt somewhat honoring. And I was like, oh my God, did it take us ending our engagement for him to really finally see the value of me and all that I am, and he's seeing deeper into me, which was what my greatest prayer was the whole time. And it seemed and felt like he was entered into that space. So even with that happening, I was still very apprehensive, because, anyone who's been in a pain body, anguished, wound connected relationship, understands, it's a scary place to be in. And so even though things seemed to be different, I was very cautious. So it culminated to this one day where we were, for the first time, going to go out to a public event as a couple and back together yet again. And that's when Great Spirit, Great Mother Earth, all my guides got together, the whole hootenanny, whole team came together. I see a lot of my Native American elder guides and just the archangels and water nymphs. I mean, literally the whistle was blown and all the troops came in. And when we were about to walk out the door, I just wanted to tell him a few minutes to finish, I think, touching up makeup when we could leave. And he was asleep on the couch, so I didn't want to wake him up. And as I walked back through my bedroom, I became clairaudient. So that's where it started for me, was I heard a voice speak in my right ear and tell me to stop and turn around.
Wow.
So that's when my gifts started to come more online, and rightfully so. And I always give great thanks when I share this story, like, I'm so glad it had to be forced upon me. Yeah. And I'm glad that eventually that happened, because I had been denying my gifts up until that point my whole life.
Wow. And then not only to have that gift come in, but to trust it in that moment. Because obviously, I don't know if you went out that evening together or not, or you.
We didn't make it out the door because of what it led me to.
Okay, so what happened next?
So I listened because this voice, that clairaudient voice, anyone who has their clairaudient gift online knows that it's truth.
Yes.
It's truth speaking to you in an energetic way that's just undeniable. And so there was not even a moment of me questioning that directive to stop and turn around. It was just, I was aligned with the truth being spoken and stopped and turned around. And it pinged me directly to his phone sitting on my bookshelf case.
Okay.
And at this point, looking back, I can recall the energetics in the room completely shifting. All the guides were present at that point, and there was an entire current around me and moving with me over to the phone and really holding me. And then the voice spoke again and said, "Brace yourself."
Ooh,
and that's when
I'm getting shivers.
Yeah, that's when I got a lump in my throat and my belly. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And this is another fascinating part because I think deep down, I kind of always knew and was so terrified at the truth of the betrayal and the addictions going on the whole time.
Yes.
I was never a snooper because if I was going to snoop, I was going to see what I was most terrified.
You were going to see.
Yeah. So I was never anyone that went into their phones and knew their codes. I did not know his phone code, but as I got to the phone, I felt and heard, I was like automatic spirit writing.
Yeah.
You know, there was a current that moved through me. I don't even remember the 4 numbers I punched in, but it opened his phone.
No.
Yeah.
So you became clairaudient or you realized that you were.
Yes.
You felt this voice guiding you to instead of waking him up, you turned and went. You were guided by this ephemeral current to his phone. And then something guided you with the exact numbers to unlock this phone.
Exactly. And the phone opened and I just knew, you know, I think it's because of that support happening. I knew like, this is your shot, Alyson. Like this is your shot at survival and the only way out is through. And so that phone, as silly as it might sound in this modern day and age, that was the first like shamanic cave that I entered was that phone, was the portal of that phone.
Whoa.
You know, the treasure you, what is that quote by Joseph Campbell? The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Right.
And that was that. And when that phone got opened, due to the support energetically I could feel around me, I went to all the places in the phone that I never wanted to go to. And I will just say, you know, it was beyond graphic and horrifying evidence of just like very, very confronting and alarming and scary graphic evidence of like endless amounts of betrayal. And in ways that I couldn't have even conceived of.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's like, you know, I personally wouldn't have a problem giving the specifics, but it's like, as horrible as that relationship was, you know, he's still a living person.
Totally.
And, you know, but it was surprising the level of the situation.
Without dishonoring him, let's just take it in the direction of how you felt in your body, experiencing that the moment you entered that cave of the phone. You saw the things you knew you didn't want to see, but you knew were there on some level. And you felt the feeling of seeing those things. Like, can we go back to that version of Alyson and just be with her experience?
Yeah. Okay. It was so many simultaneous things. It was you always knew for some of it. I remember the feeling and the vision of in that moment, because, we all enter in with different soul contracts and different experiences that we sign up for to provide various levels of evolution. And everyone's alchemical makeup and divine path is different, of course. So for me, I was facing my greatest fear. To some, massive betrayal, it might not even be much of a wounding for them, and they can keep their life moving and wish that person well, but chalk it up to whatever many past life experiences I had, whatever it was. For me, this lifetime facing betrayal, I just got flashback to a past life. Actually, I don't share the story often because it can be so easily misconstrued, but in a past life, I actually killed a husband who had cheated on me. Mm. And so, and that's the one I know about.
Right.
So this was big for me. And so I also simultaneously remember a massive aspect of me collapsing and dying.
Wow.
So it was whatever that was within me, inside of me, it dropped to the ground and collapsed, yet this human shape and form remained completely calm.
Right.
I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I actually didn't say anything to him. The energetics woke him up.
Whoa.
I was completely silent.
Whoa.
I didn't wake him up. The energies did. And he got up off the couch, and I saw him through my right periphery walking through the kitchen into the bedroom. And I have the phone, and I'm completely calm. I know it's that angelic support that kept me that way. And I just remember looking at him. So my real name is Alyson Mills. Alyson Charles is a stage name that got developed back in high school, actually. And I remember saying to him, I'm Alyson Mills. I'm Alyson. How could you do this to me? I just was so confused. We had been in this seemingly best friend, most closest person I'd ever been close to in my entire life for almost 2 decades.
Right.
I just couldn't grasp how it was possible that he could do that to me. I just remember being so wildly bewildered. Mm-hmm. And of course, his defense mechanisms were kicking up. I'm sure it was very confronting, at the very least energetically, to his system that this culminating point was happening.
Right.
And his initial reaction was, "What are you doing going through my phone?"
Right.
And I'm like, oh, we're so far beyond that discussion at this point.
Right.
And so I just calmly, I still, through those defenses, stayed very calm and just asked him to pack his things and to leave and to never come back again.
Wow.
So he went into the bathroom, began to pack his toiletries up and to fill his overnight bag. And I remember the sadness starting to come in, the reality that through the attempts to exit out and it never happening, and this cycling over and over and over and over again and again for 16 and a half years, that it was finally done. And we walked to the door of my place in Brooklyn, and I asked him one last time, "Oh God, I haven't, oh shit, you little booger." this one moment is so sad. I remember he had his bag on his shoulder, and he had put his hand on the doorknob and opened it partly, but then he stopped and turned around, and that,
oh God. Yeah.
Because it was that sadness in him too that had finally arrived, and it's like we both knew that this karmic cycle was done, and we had been so entrenched, even though it was in such an unhealthy, toxic, sick way the vast majority of the time. It's when a bond like that is being broken, it's very earth-shattering. And I just remember the sadness in his face. And I just asked him one last time, why? And I remember what he said. I'm just going back to how he looked when he said it. I think it was real for him when he said, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he really didn't know why or how. He was also in denial and blinded by his addictions and woundings and traumas. And so I believe when he said, I remember he kind of hung his head and shook his head and said, I don't know. I think that was real for him. Not understanding all the dynamics that were leading to those behaviors. And he left, and it was after he left that then it got, the tornado came in and the intensities and then it got full on. Reality was starting to hit more. And I remember then being so scared and angry because in me realizing all the infidelities and betrayals, I then felt my health to be at risk.
Right.
And I remember being like, oh my God.
That's a horrible feeling.
Very scary. Yeah. I was like, I have to get a doctor's appointment today.
And get tested.
Yeah. And I did that, and I went alone. I just felt so alone and so scared. And I just remember crying on the subway, going to this doctor that I'd never gone to before. And I think I can't even trace back. I think I kind of blocked out and blacked out that actual appointment because I don't remember what the office looked like. I don't remember if the doctor was a male woman. I don't remember.
Right.
But I got tested, and by the grace of God, thankfully, I was healthy and well. That's one of the things I look back in all of those years, knowing that was going on in varying capacities and degrees for almost 20 years. I'm like, how did I stay healthy?
Right.
That one, when I cross back over to the other side, that's probably one of the questions I'll ask,
right.
Is how, I then knew I needed support because everything I knew was upside down. I wasn't even fully registering at this point that I'd become clairaudient and all of those things, because then these more earthly real pieces were clobbering me upside the head,
right.
The doctor's appointments. And so I just wanted to get back to Indiana where I grew up, to stay at my grandma's place and to be with my mom and my grandma and to just try to connect some dots and figure stuff out. Because everything collapsed.
Yeah.
All the realities that I had built up to be true were no longer, and the true me was finally getting the first gasps of air to come alive inside of me. And so when I arrived to Indiana and went to my grandma's place, I stayed in the back bedroom, and I remember her couch folded out to a bed, and I just stayed back there, and my clairvoyance started to come online, and I was being shown
the truth. It was like my whole life, and especially my pathway with him, was being shown as a movie. But yet I was seeing it without the veils of illusion and denial.
Right.
I was seeing all the truth of it. And so that's when I had my surrender moment. And that was another big step for me in acknowledging that I was not who I thought I was. Nothing was what I thought it was. And that I was finally asking for help from the unseen realms.
Yes.
And that's what changed my life.
Wow. Oh my God. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of my own story is popping up for me as you're sharing yours. And I'm thinking back to a time in my life when I was living in Canada and working as a teacher. And I was in a long-term relationship with this wonderful man. We lived together. We were a great team. And I think that summer was the summer that my stepbrother lost his battle with addictions. And, he was like just 20 or 21 at that time. And I was maybe 23. And it was, although he and I weren't terribly close, it was one of those rapturous moments that like shakes you. And it was like the bubble popped, like the beautiful bubble of like, I'm just living in the matrix, like doing the next thing and checking the next box. And I've got this career and making money and I'm with this man and we have a dog and
I'm doing great.
Yeah. Everything feels awesome. And then, you lose this person that's so close to you, that's been in a very heavy existential battle. And it puts a deep pause in you.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that summer trying to care about life, but just feeling wrong. Like I was wearing shoes that didn't fit, but the shoes were my entire life. And just being in denial of that, like everything's fine. Like I'm just going to snap back into it at some point. But it was this feeling of, like I woke up inside my life, but it felt like somebody else's life. And I didn't want the life that I had, but I kept pretending that I did in hopes that all the weird feelings would just go away.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of a shell of a person for, 3 months or so, preparing for the next school year, pretending everything was going to be fine.
We're just going to keep going this way.
We're just going to keep going. Everything's fine. Things between my partner and I were really challenging. I flew home for the funeral. I don't think he could come with me because of his work schedule. And I didn't even really want him to. And that was like a big indicator too. It was just like, I felt so far away from this person that was my most intimate person. And I made a very difficult decision. One of the most difficult decisions of my life emotionally was to leave the job that I was working at. And to this day, I still feel the sting of that because it was, I'd been teaching the same group of children in elementary school for 2 years. This was going to be my third year as their teacher because I was in a Waldorf school and we looped up with them. And so I'd been at teacher training, like physically at teacher training all summer, but not really there. I was like somewhere off being that like shell of myself who had partly departed. And then, went back through the motions of preparing my classroom for the year, I was fully planned. My entire curriculum for that entire school year was set. I had meetings with my mentors. And I think it was like 3 or 4 days before school started. I'm talking like the weekend before parent orientations. I looked at my partner and I was like, I can't do this. He's like, what do you mean you can't do this? I was like, I can't do this. Like everything feels wrong. I don't know if I'm grieving. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's up from down. It just feels wrong. And I can't be in integrity and stand in front of those kids and be the shining pinnacle of a teacher that they deserve when like I'm not right inside. So he was like, okay, what do you want to do? And I was like, I need to go on like a grief leave. And like, I didn't have the bravery, I think, to quit or resign at that time. I still was hoping that I'd feel better and then I'd go back. And so all I really had the bravery to do at the time was send an email and just say like, I can't, I'm in something, I can't. And I remember my fingers shaking before I hit send and, on that email, and just the moment I sent it, feeling relief and sickness, just kind of like waiting for them to get back to me and inevitably say what they said, which was like, what? Like
school starts tomorrow.
Yeah, like you can't leave us. This community needs you. And like, please let's talk about this. And I remember at the time just feeling like I knew what I had to do was take that pause. I couldn't have really told you why, but I knew I couldn't go have a meeting with them because I would just buckle because the guilt was already so much. And so about 48 hours after I made that decision, I'm sure you can imagine the emotional letdown of something like that, where I thought I was going to be like teaching that Monday. And here I am in bed, just like, what do I do now? And my partner had a wedding that he was attending, and, I was in no space to be going to a wedding. So I remember I drove him to the wedding. And he went to the wedding. I was at home, like feeling out my feelings. And then got a text from him that was like, okay, me and a bunch of the guys are going to hang out at the lounge afterward. And so I was like, okay, let me know when you're ready to be picked up. I'll pick you up. Cause I knew they were drinking, and didn't hear from him. And then he said something like, they're offering free cabs from the lounge for our wedding party for this group. And I was like, okay. And something in me was just like, I'm going to wait up for him. Like I'm just feeling really sad and I want to cuddle someone. And like, also something doesn't feel right. And hours were going by, and it was like well after midnight, maybe 1 or 2 at this point. And I'm texting him and he's like, oh, I'm on my way. And there was this one moment where he's like, I'm in the cab. And I tried to call him, and I can't remember if he picked up or not. But if he did pick up, it was like this. Then he hung up, or he didn't pick up, but he was texting me. And he was like, sorry, can't answer, I think is what he said in the text. Was like, this cab driver doesn't know where he's going. And I was like, okay, he's probably had a couple of drinks and like, this is all not really making sense. And I looked out the front window and I was waiting for him because I knew he was just around the corner. And I watched him walk. I was like, wait, I thought a cab, he came in and I was like, I thought the cab, why didn't the cab take you to our front door? And he's like, hey, he didn't know where he was going. And I was like, okay, like, are you okay? Did you have fun? He's like, yeah, I'm just tired. I want to go to bed. And that night, I think it took me to the point of getting so broken open by the state of my life and, losing my career, choosing to leave at that point, being in this vulnerable space of surrendering to like my partner was going to financially take care of us until I got better. And what happened that night is I had a dream. And I can't remember the exact specifics, but the energetics was like, your partner's being unfaithful to you. Or there's been a breach in trust in the relationship. And I didn't know to what degree. And of course, I'm sure a lot of women who have experienced the kind of betrayal that you and I have can relate to this, where you question yourself and you're like, no, I'm just being crazy and all of these things. And I had gone to bed, and I remember that I think when I woke up, he was gone because he had to go to work. He had like a very strange shift. Maybe started at 4 a.m. or something crazy like that. And so I woke up alone in the house again. And I just started to work with oracle cards more deeply. And I had this one deck, and I was like, I'm going to pull a card over all of this. And I pulled a card, and it was Stone People. And the subtitle was Vigilance. And I read the description, and it was basically like, now's the time to be vigilant, to pay attention to the red flags you're seeing. Trust yourself, trust what's coming up. Basically saying to me, to paraphrase, you're not crazy. There's something here. What you're feeling is real.
And the Stone People anchoring that in, like, it's like, we are going to ground you in this message. Like,
totally. But I didn't want to see it because I was like, no. He's going to take care of us. I'm going to heal. Everything's going to be fine. And so I think I catatonically waited for him for like the next 4 hours or something on the couch. And I was just like, I was so numb. I was barely feeling anything at that point. I think pieces were just shifting way too fast. And finally, he walked in the door, and I'm just staring off into the distance like a really creepy person. And then he was like, Hal, are you okay? And I just said, can you please sit down? I really need to talk to you. And he's like, okay. And I said, I'm not mad. In fact, I don't even think I can be mad right now. I'm not feeling anything. And I'm not saying this to shame you. Please don't disrespect me with denial. It's come to my attention that there's been a breach in trust in our relationship. And I just really need to hear it from you. And I waited, and I looked in his eyes, and he gathered himself, and he took a giant inhale and a giant exhale, and he just went, who told you? And much like you, my reaction was like, okay, I really just need some space right now. Can you get everything you need for work for the next couple of days, and please go stay with a friend? And he was like, can't, and I was like, no, I just have nothing. I am fully at capacity. And so he left, he took his stuff, he left. And of course, immediately my phone starts blowing up with all these texts and regrets and explanations and, trying to say the degree to which it was like, oh, it was just a kiss or whatever it was. I think I found out later that it was actually a woman, obviously, who had driven him home, not a cab, and that they had parked around the corner because they were kissing or whatever, and they didn't want to do that in front of our house. So the next couple days were not only like, okay, I've just quit my job, but like, now I can't not pay this rent. Like, what the fuck am I going to do now? I don't even know who I am. I remember like 24 hours later looking out the back window in our back driveway because we had like a park in the alleyway situation, and his truck was there. I was like, oh, maybe his friend picked him up or but he was in so much shame that he had slept in his truck.
Oh, he didn't want to have to tell anyone
He didn't
why.
want to have to tell anyone, and he kind of thought that I was going to like come around to it.
Yeah.
And, in his defense, whatever. I mean, I think that at that point, Alyson, I was looking for an excuse to end the relationship. And maybe I just wasn't brave enough. But for months, I hadn't been showing up as an ideal partner either. I hadn't been asking him for what I needed, or, I didn't have the self-awareness at the time. So I have compassion for both of us and how that unfolded. But much like yourself, it ended up being the catalyst for me booking a one-way flight to New York City on a whim. I spent 14 days there. And at the end of the 14 days, I had the keys to an apartment with a Craigslist roommate, and I had 3 job offers. It like doesn't happen, especially in New York, So it was divine. And I flew right back I basically said, you can keep the apartment. You can have everything in here because I can't fit it in my Kia. And I'm gonna do this drive all the way from Western Canada all the way to Brooklyn. You know, I had some help along the way from some people, but it was like more than 45-hour drive or something like that. And I started a new life. And so it is those moments that completely shatter us, where we get to the point of everything we've constructed in our ego identity is obliterated, that we have to go back in. We have to go back in. And you talk about clairaudience, and I want you to explain to some listeners who maybe have never heard clairaudience, maybe they've heard clairvoyance, and we can explain the difference. But I want to talk about that because that also started to wake up for me, where for me, it's like this deep inner mantra voice. It's like this, it's this voice that's mine, but also not mine. And it speaks in a way that I want to say it's non-emotional, and not in the sense that it doesn't have feeling, but that it's not driven by primal sort of reactive reptilian brain desires. So yeah, if we can go back to your piece about clairaudience, maybe if you can give what that means, and maybe different types of psychic gifts that exist.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Tuning in. Gosh, there's so many, and like a lot of how my gifts work and who I have evolved to at this point as a shaman and so many other things. Like, I don't even know how to put into words what a lot of my gifts are. And I don't know if there are names for them because it's honestly, and so right now, like I'm a seer. And so oftentimes, like when in interviews like this, and I don't know if by the angle of anyone watching this, if you can tell, but oftentimes I'm looking elsewhere, and it's not, I'm fully here and I'm listening, but I see. And so even as like you're sharing your story, I track off just slightly to one side and up, and I can see it happening to you. I can see like what just came in that moment a second ago, because that's what reminded me, like, this is one of my main gifts. I can literally see into a past, present, future experience, into other dimensions, into other realms. So my seer gift is one of the definite strongest ones that I can access at any time. And when messages from the unseen realms want to present to me, even at a time where I'm not attempting to access in, I will be shown. Things will, like, when it can happen anywhere, I can be at a gathering and all of a sudden, like, I'll get a picture of something off to one side. The other thing that I'm very adept with is, I call it my sniffer. I am highly skilled, and I say this just because it's truth. Like, I am very good at discerning people, and I am never invasive with my gifts. Like, after I meet someone, it's not like I go home and like tune in and tap into their soul. I never do that without someone's permission. But if I'm given permission, I can tell a person exactly, I can really anything. Mm-hmm. I can access into their truth and their inner world and their soul, and point out what their most debilitating insecurities are right now, or tune into a true aspect of them that is maybe their biggest divine gift that's still not unlocked, or you name it. I can access soul and tap in. And so
yeah, my sniffer when it comes to people and who I feel comfortable being around and who I just, I wish everyone well. And I know we're all learning. It's not a judgment thing. It's just a knowing thing of I choose to not be around that person because I don't have the bandwidth to intermingle with what they are currently embodying.
Completely.
So it's not like I'm saying they're a bad person. It's just like, that's definitely not for me. And yeah, I mean, those are just two examples, but the clairaudience, yeah, I mean, I hear it in both ears, I think, but it's predominantly in my right. And yeah, it's a voice from source. And so like you said, when the messages come in, it's not like they don't carry an emotional charge. It's just but it's also not a flatline monotonous voice either. Right. It's just the voice of pure source truth.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So clairaudience being more this ability to hear, and clairvoyance being, correct me if I'm wrong, but more of that visioning. Is that kind of correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, is it your belief that all of us have psychic gifts? And if so, why are some of us in touch with those more? And is it possible to do things to nurture the waking up of our psychic gifts?
Yes. To all, I think that you just asked. Yes, I do believe we all, we're all these wildly magnificent, multi-dimensional, multi-talented, multifaceted beings that hold within us. We are encoded with so many different abilities and ancient wisdoms. And there's, that's truly why I never get bored with life, because just the inward exploration alone is just, you can go infinite places. It's really astounding. So I do believe we absolutely all have various styles and types of spiritual abilities and psychic gifts. But again, with that infinite word, even when it comes to abilities and gifts, they are infinite in nature in terms of how they can work and the way that they can communicate with you and the way that you are to be of service with them, because there's a lot of responsibility that goes with it too. And especially with my seer and soul reading ability, it has been challenging at times. And I really give myself a lot of credit for the way in which I walk the path and utilize these gifts, because I feel I'm very, very dialed in and tapped into knowing when and when not to speak on what you're picking up on.
Totally.
Because it can be very, very, very damaging to someone just because you hear a whispering of what might be soon coming for that person with XYZ experience, or you see a certain thing, does not mean that they are equipped at all to hear about that.
Totally.
And it may not be the right time. So you have to learn how to carry things that aren't your own and how to expel them, so that you're not holding them on behalf of them. So you're not playing into any sort of rescuer or martyr. I mean, there are a trillion glimmering pieces in just this one little category.
Totally. You're making me think of a time a few months ago before I launched the men's program I was running called The Conscious Man. I had an Instagram follower, unsolicited, send me a message warning me. Right. And she said something like, I'm getting a message for you.
Oh boy.
Right. And it was not someone I'd interacted with. This was like a DM request.
So I can tell you, and I know you know this, I'm just reiterating to listeners, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners already know this, but right
now already, this is a hard pass. This is a no. This is a never do this.
Right. Because it's completely non-consensual. And in my opinion, it is really in the realm of, I don't want to call it like dark energy or black magic or anything like that. I wouldn't want to go that far, but it is injecting yourself into somebody else's karmic path.
And the other note that's coming in is anyone who I know who is truly in a pure divine connection to Source, Great Spirit, and a pure, true divine connection to the ancient wisdom, love, light, and truth that lives within them and is in a true, pure divine connection to Great Mother Earth, would never do exactly what this person is doing. So that shows you right there, there's not a pure, true connection.
Right. So to close the loop, what she said was, I'm getting a message to remind you to be very discerning about who you work with, all clients that you coach with, and the possibility of attracting people with, well, her inference was that I was going to be attracting males to coach who really just wanted to be with me, and that people were going to pay me because they wanted to be around me. And then she said, but I can't say more because it is your karmic path to go through this, right? So that's like a double whammy. It's like, I'm giving you this message that you never asked for, and I'm going to freak you out a little bit by leaving out all the details. And so
this is abusive.
It like, even with all the kind of shamanic work I had done, it stuck for a couple of days. It was like this energy of, I felt rage come up. I was like, who does this person think she is to just come into my space, my inbox? This is my space. I didn't ask. It's one thing to say, hey, I got a message for you. Are you willing to hear it? And at that point I'd be like, no, because I'm very discerning about who I seek counsel with. But there was no consent. And then that added piece of, insinuating that it was not about my skill set or what I had to offer, but rather this physical piece of me. And so there was a lot of work that I did in those 2 days around, at first watching my own judgment of this other person, going, okay, she's jealous of the thing that I'm doing. Okay, maybe it's physical jealousy. I don't know. And I had to work with the layers, watch my criticism, watch my judgment, watch my own grief around, oh man, is this true? Is this true that I have nothing to offer? And go through that. And it really threw me for a loop. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I really want to encourage listeners who open themselves to anybody for Reiki, for energetic work, for intuitive work, anything. Be careful about giving your power away, and be discerning. Trust your gut. If it's don't just go to a healer or a person because all your friends say they're amazing, and don't go to a psychic because they have a 3-month wait list unless you are feeling deeply called. Don't go sit with ayahuasca just because everybody else is doing it. Wait and listen to your own inner voice, that deeper, clear audience that is available to us all above anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I share the exact same sentiments, like a broken record, over and over again as well, because it is that important, and because there are so many people having initial and further spiritual awakenings within themselves, and because it can be a discombobulating experience, sometimes an innate reaction can be to seek outside of ourselves for the answer, for some sort of semblance of support. And so, yes, not only do I echo everything you just said, but I add on the button of, that's the precise moment and opportunity to go deeper within yourself and to really unlock and begin to nourish and cultivate the trust within your own being and the trust within your own highest, most grounded self, and the trust within that ancient wisdom that lives within you. Because truly, and, again, we've all heard this, but, we are our own greatest healer and teacher. And even when, I rarely ever do any sort of, I laugh when I say this because, so what I was about to say is in all my years of shamanism, I rarely work one-on-one with people, but as a woman who went through a program together, and we got to know each other, and she was a student in my online school and things. And she messaged me last week and said, every time I hear you say in interviews that you never work one-on-one with people, I laugh because you've been working with me one-on-one for years, in the other realms. And so it's actually 100% true. So I give her credit for making me remember that point. But I don't sit with people in the physical space and do one-on-one work the way a lot of other shamans and healers do. But when I do, and even in those much grander capacities, because I typically work with huge mass audiences, I am always surrendered to the process and surrendered to whatever medicine messages and transmissions that need to work through me to serve the highest, greatest good. And in that, there's always the rooted foundation of returning the person back home to themselves.
Right.
And if there's ever a healer that is like using sales tactics or even energetic tactics so that you become dependent upon them and feel like that you can't find your way throughout life without their clearing or holding space for you, like that is a dance that you need to be wildly consciously aware of.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that piece. What came through for me just now is wanting to loop back and close that piece around the idea of, it was like rock star shaman. And then also like where we left your story was, you leaving this toxic codependent relationship, you were doing the radio, the TV, and then like, where did this shamanism piece come in for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Through the invitation that I finally gave myself and Great Spirit, Great Mother Earth to align and commune with me as one. And when you asked about the psychic gifts, and one of the other questions was, if someone wants to open them up, is there something that they can do? And this is my most recommended way. It's through a surrender statement. And I used to have an online course. I was instructed by Divine a couple of months ago to cease it unexpectedly. So I honored that. But within that course, I guided 9 different shamanic journeys. And one of them, I offer a surrender statement that's very clean and precise. And what you can do is, for me, my work and where the name rock star shaman comes from is my work directly down into earth, rock, and drop directly up into sky, star, source. And that is who, and of course, the divine wisdom, love, light, and truth that is me and lives within me. It's those 3 connection points. It's that vertical line that runs. And that is what I surrender into. So if you are really clear that you want to open your spiritual abilities and gifts, really take your time. And I recommend sitting in an altar space, and an altar can be a candle. Let's not make it, it doesn't have to be this whole, ornate, complex thing,
right.
But it's a sacred space that's reserved specifically for your connection with yourself and divine. And take your time, and get really clear in what that statement is. And maybe you do even want to write it out and speak something like, the divine wisdom that is me, my dearest, greatest Mother Earth, my most honoring ally and Great Spirit. I give myself permission to fully release, align, connect and enter into pure, divine, unconditionally loving communion with you now. And I'm expressing my readiness to allow my divine spiritual gifts to be revealed to me in the timing and way that will serve my highest, greatest good and the highest, greatest good of all. I am ready and willing to be aware, and I am opening these gateways while keeping my divine energies fully cleared and protected at this time. And so it is. And that's just, I've never said it in that way, but like, that's just my example of you tune in and find the flow and way that feels right to you. And then it becomes your responsibility, because things will enter in and messages will be revealed. And what I call the divine connect the dots, the next steps for you will be shown, but it's up to you to heed those whispers and to take those wildly vulnerable and courageous steps. And it's up to you to keep your conscious awareness field very open, to start to begin that co-creative whole union with yourself and the unseen realms. So there's that. I know I went back on that tangent back to how people can invite the psychic gifts in, but how can I get us back to
the shamanism piece and
how
kind
it
of
came
like
up?
how that came into your life?
Yeah. So it started with that surrender statement of show me the way. And that is where I honor and give myself a lot of credit to my total devotion to doing exactly what I just said. That I was shown the very first shaman. I don't even remember how I was shown to work with her. And I'm actually going to have her on my podcast, Ceremony Circle, next week. And I'm so excited because she was the very first shaman I was ever told to work with.
What's her name?
Sarah Bamford Siedelman. And she is an MD turned shaman who lives in Minnesota.
Sweet. Really
incredible woman. And somehow I was directed to her, and I still remember pieces of that journey that she did for me. And I can't wait for her and I to explore that more. And I'm so curious in her witnessing from meeting me in that place that was very dark and had just had my egoic shell obliterated and the veil lifted, to her watching me all these years, to where I sit now. I'm so curious what that's been like for her to witness that.
Yeah, that would be special.
Yeah, but there were so many teachers and healers along the way, as well as my commitment to going inward, deeper, over and over again. And you're guided. You will be guided. And so after about a year and a half, 2 years of being committed to healing and holding myself, I was finally at a place of readiness for the shamanic alchemy and the calling inside of me to reignite and to come back alive. And for anyone that receives any type of calling, but for me, I can specifically obviously speak to the shamanic calling, which is a very specific one. When it enters in, when it pings, when it comes on board, there is absolutely no questioning, no denial of what is occurring. It is specific, it is direct, it is profound, it is beyond words, and it's just a whole knowing that comes about every aspect of your being, mind, body, spirit, soul. So when that came on board and online, it was a very scary time, and I'll condense this because I'm sure we've been talking for a long time at this point, but it was a bit nerve-wracking, because the first vision I was ever shown around my calling and how my shamanism is to work is how it works very publicly and in front of very large audiences. And I was at I'm having a breakdown lunch session with 3 of my sisters in Manhattan, sobbing at the table of, I think it's called Peace Food Cafe. Do you know it?
Yeah.
I had
so funny.
I sat in there at the corner round table, like sobbing. And one of my sisters sitting to my left, I was closing my eyes and going through this breakdown to breakthrough moment. And she was like, talk to us, tell us what you're seeing. And that's when that vision came in of me on stage. And the thousands, hundreds, thousands in the crowd of like this arena type place. And there was a lot of sacred herbs being, shared for clearing, and various shamanic and spiritual instruments around. And I was on stage, and the downloaded name came in, Rockstar Shaman. Mm-hmm. And so it's both parts. It does in some ways represent how I bridge, these ancient wisdoms and technologies and shamanic truths into the modern times through, my work in media and reaching the masses and mainstream. But at its core, its deepest meaning is what I referenced before. It's the work of connecting to earth and sky, which is all of our birthright.
Yeah. Wow. What a powerful vision to have, first and foremost. And my question coming up, because this might be a little bit of my own projection, but putting myself in your shoes and some of my own situations, what's coming up is I'm wondering if you felt any resistance to stepping into that idea of like modern shamanism. And also like we have this piece on the back burner about appropriation. And we have this piece about the terminology of shamanism being thrown around. And I know for me, and I intuit for you, of wanting to be deeply honoring of all these lineages, like this idea of like the shaman on stage, like did any of that did you have a resistance to that?
Hugely.
Yeah.
I was aware instantaneously of the magnitude of it, of the boldness of it, of the responsibility of it. And I hit up against immense resistance. Yes, to the point where when I got home that night after the instruction to utilize that name came in, I was really toiling over it and fighting against it. And I called one of the other sisters that were at that lunch, and I was pretty terrified, because I, of course, always keep an eye on, what is coming from purity and soul and what is coming from ego. And I wanted to hear her opinion, an outside perspective. What does this feel like to you? What is the texture of this? Like, be real.
Right.
And she really felt into it and said, I can't remember verbatim because this was so many years ago, but it was something along the lines of, Alyson, if anyone else had come to me with this question, I think that I would say it's a no, and that it just doesn't feel right. But for you, it truly feels a yes, and it feels of truth. So because at this point, you have to remember, I had just recently become awakened, and having, through my awakening, realized I had lived all my previous years in denial. You then become wildly aware of keeping yourself in check at all times.
Oh, yeah.
Around these pieces. So that's why I wanted to tune in with her, because it's like, look, if I'm in denial or in ego,
my shit,
like
before I embarrass myself.
Truly.
Right.
Yeah. And, she said, what you could do is you could change your handle over. My very first Instagram handle was Channel Magical. And she's like, you could change it over, and if it feels off and wrong, you can always change it back. And I was like, okay, you're right. And then I did, the most important step was I chose to go on a shamanic journey that evening and call forward Jesus, Ascended Master Jesus, who is my main love and light guide this lifetime. And in that journey, the specific intention was around this name.
Right.
And let me know. And he was emphatic that his answer to me was, this is why you are here.
Right.
So once I got the clarity of the purity and integrity around this instruction, then there was a whole other set of feelings of resistance, of just like, but oh my God.
Yeah.
And so I remember I changed the handle over, And I was like, oh God, this is big. It's big. It's a very charged, big, bold name.
Yeah.
And I knew that a lot was going to come of it. And I stayed with it, and it has been a very medicinal ride the entire way through, having been assigned such a unique shamanic name. It has been continuous medicine, and I have danced with it in so many different iterations. I did change at one point many years ago from Rockstar Shaman, my handle, over to I am Alyson Charles, to give myself some breath and some space from it, because I did get to a place where I did want it to quote unquote go away.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have an association with it. But as much as I at times have resisted it, its persistence in its divine directive to me remains. And so it does still live. When you go to my Instagram, it's still on there, and it's still somewhere on my website. I did at one point change it to an AKA. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
I danced with it and tried to alchemize it out, but it's a part of my mission. So I continue to honor that.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I think that piece will be really helpful for a lot of people listening who know a thing about themselves, however that's come through. They know a thing, and they know exactly the thing that I'm talking about right now as I'm saying this, and they're being like, oh yeah, I know I need to step into that thing. I want to step into that thing, but it feels so big. It feels so menacing. It feels so huge. I feel the burden around it. I feel the responsibility around it. I have doubts around it. And I think that your story is very encouraging. I think it's very affirming. And I want to encourage anyone listening to just reflect deeply and let your story integrate for them, and acknowledge that when it's right, it doesn't mean there's no fear. Doesn't mean there's like, oh, I'll do it when the fear goes away, because that's when it will be right. No, that's not always the case. Sometimes maybe, but quite often, as has been the theme of this conversation together, it's those rock bottom moments. It's those hard left turns. It's those empty pits that we're just sitting in that open up the space for us to be brave and courageous and to really step into our calling.
Yeah. And it's remembering that it's medicine. And that's been one of the biggest things for me is, I'm fully surrendered to this path. I'm fully surrendered to my calling. I'm fully surrendered to the directives I'm given. And with that, and being a medicine woman and a medicine person, the medicine is going to work in infinite ways. And so it has been a piece I've had to put a lot of work in throughout the years, that knowing, medicine doesn't always taste good. And so as a medicine woman walking in this intriguing earth time, knowing that there will be some who feel, taste, sense, see my medicine, and like you think, cool, wow, badass, interesting, I'd like to learn more. And then there will be those that hack it out, spit it out, wildly flail against it, kick against it, and do not like the taste of it at all. And in both of those ends of the full spectrum of possible experiences of the medicine dose is you can stay right there in that initial reaction that you had from it, or you can invite the medicine in more and allow the medicine to continue to teach and deliver and bless and alchemize in the specific way that it's designed for you. Right. And knowing that, how that medicine might alchemize for someone, and it may never happen this lifetime, that they come around to quote unquote liking me, liking who I am, liking how I do my divine mission.
Yeah.
You have to get to a place the best you can over and over again of accepting that.
Yeah.
And what keeps me at peace and what keeps me sane and what keeps me strong and holding this line forward over and over and over again is I know I am right with myself and I know I am right with God, Goddess, period.
Yeah.
Hard stop.
Yes. Beautiful. I love what you just said about medicine. And what came to me is like in this conversation about the reactions of people. And, you know, there's this very human desire to be liked. I think all of us either have dealt with it or currently deal with it. I think it's really part of having an ego. And so I'm not going to demonize that. But something I've been practicing myself, and we can loop this back to even the woman who entered my DMs and the cascade of thought processes that went on around that was medicine for me. And so what you're saying, what I'm hearing is by shining our own light, that is our only responsibility. It is not our responsibility to control people's reactions. And if you are listening to a person, interacting with a piece of content, interfacing with something, a group of people that you find yourself bad othering, so to speak, that is your medicine. That is the teaching, because there is still a great deal of emotional charge around that. That is exactly where the journey begins. So for me, with this woman who entered my DMs, I'm not going to sit here and say she was a bad person with bad intentions. I don't know. But what I can tell you is I learned a lot about my own self-doubt in that moment. She absolutely shone a light on where I could go inward and work with, wow, there are still some worthiness pieces here that I need to deal with, that I get to deal with, because or else this would have just blown right over.
Well, and so this is where it gets super nuanced. And this is that portal we were talking about before we turn the mics on, because yes, to everything you just said, but this is where it requires one to learn how to be an alchemist and eventually a master alchemist. Okay, bear with me because someone is just coming in as you were saying that, because when I shared that the way that she entered in was abusive, I stand by that.
Yes.
But it is medicine.
Right. It's both. Yes, absolutely.
So it's like, it's honoring both. I am not saying she is a horrible, nasty,
right,
good for nothing human.
Right.
I am not saying that at all.
Right.
I'm saying she is a fellow earth walker on the path. Bless her light. I send her love. And what she did was abusive because it was violating. Yet it is also medicine.
Yes.
And by choosing to be an alchemist and eventually a master alchemist, you learn how to transmute and alchemize fear into love, abuse into ascension. You learn how to allow it all to serve and grow you. There's so much in it.
Yes. Yes. That feels really right. You know, and everything you just said about the nuance, fully and completely. And I think that's such a gorgeous way to paint it and to remind people these things are not black or white.
Absolutely not.
But the indicator for me is the feelings and
Yes.
my body, and the statement that you just gave of the full picture of it honors my feelings around being allowed to be triggered by that, honors her walk and the dance of it all in one. And for me, vibrationally, that statement, like I feel lifted, I feel seen, I feel integrated, and I feel complete. So that's the invitation to, I think when these things happen, is to lift above, zoom out, and take all these little puzzle pieces of nuance and integrate them together.
Aho, sister. And yes, it's always a leaning in, you know, of course, some waves that come in, they're so charged and can really rattle you, and you might get stuck in that rattle for an hour, for 3 days, whatever. But then it becomes, you know, as opposed to running away or hiding or turning away or leaning out, it becomes a constant asking of how can I lean into this? How can I see their perspective a little bit more? How can I learn what the teaching is, what the medicine is in this for me to ascend me and grow me deeper into my divinity? It's it's a constant exploration and honoring investigation of it all. And yes, it can feel tiring. And yes, it can be a lot, but yes, it brings the greatest miracles we could ever know. So it's always worth it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As we're rounding out this conversation, there are 2 more things I want to ask you about. The last one I'll save is about the projects that you're currently working on. But to bring things sort of back to your story and my story in this theme of betrayal, and moving through it, namely, because here's a little through line, which I know I already shared with you the first time we got to meet in person, but your beloved Luke Story, who also has been a guest on this show. And I shared a story with you about when I first met Luke down at Soltara. And he was doing a set of ayahuasca ceremonies there. He shared with me on our episode about his wild and wonderful and emotional journey with addictions and his healing path. And then off air, he and I got to talk a little bit about life and trust and relationships and things that we were both, you know, I was partnered at the time with somebody else and was sharing things about that. And he was sharing with me about his journey and sort of almost reaching this point in his life where he had surrendered to, okay, this might be it. It might be me alone. But I could feel underneath that when we were talking that there was this deep desire for partnership. And I believe the 2 of you had just kind of begun corresponding during that time. And I can't remember exactly how it came up, but I think I asked him a question like, well, is there anybody right now? And I saw his face light up. He's like, yeah, well, there's this one woman and, you know, I think we're going to fly to like meet or, you know, meet up soon. And we did a lot of just like talking in between meals and in between ceremonies that week, kind of unpacking things. And then I saw a few months later that the 2 of you were, you know, fully dating, fully out, fully public, and just the way that this man was singing your praises. And it just felt like truly a match made in heaven. And then now to hear that you guys are engaged and that you've moved here to Austin and this is all unfolded in the last year, I wanted to ask you, how do we heal these deep betrayal pieces, right? Like I'm sure that those came up for you in trusting somebody deeply again. Like if there's someone listening who's working with trying to open to a new relationship or heal past betrayals like you and I had, how do we begin the process, or how do we remain aware when we get activated if we're in the middle of trusting or opening to someone? What has been that journey for you, healing this betrayal piece and welcoming your beloved Luke into your life?
What comes up for me when you ask that is simultaneous laughter and barfing.
Perfect. My favorite pastimes.
Yeah. I mean, because I was just reflecting back. I mean, for me, and this is for me, what it took was a lot. And it took, for me, years of celibacy.
Wow.
And yeah,
Yes, many of my friends were astounded.
I'm astounded.
They were like, I didn't know it was possible. 5 years?
5 years? I'm thinking like, okay, I've done like a year, 2 years, but like 5.
Nearly 5
Wow.
years. And, but it honestly wasn't, I mean, there were times where it was challenging. Yes, there were moments, but overall, and Luke reflects the same sentiments. He was about 18 months, almost 2 years celibate. And we shared the same sentiment that it really was not that hard. And there were times where I was just like, oh my God, like, that more animalistic, like, I want somebody to just give it to me.
Right.
But, overall, it just, that beautiful divine cultivation of learning how to honor my body. So circling back, of learning, what does that look like? How does that move? How does that function? Like, what I had to learn and teach myself, and I had to be taught by divine. What does it mean to have my mind, body, spirit, and soul honored in a partnership? And especially with that physical piece. And so for me, it took being consciously single for a long time. And then it took being celibate for a very long time. And within those passageways was a lot. I mean, it was continuous healing in many capacities. And some of it pertains specifically to like getting clairaudient instruction to lay down on my floor in my place in Brooklyn and like open my legs in a certain way and like do this spontaneous, like, womb healing that I didn't even know I knew how to do. And like, I mean, that's just one tiny example, but I mean, it was nook by nook, finding hidden stuff down crevice of a nodule to heal energetically after nodule, after piece, after nook, after nodule, after thread, after layer, after thinking that layer is complete, another layer. And yet, it's all okay and it's all beautiful, because that to me is what life is. Life is ceremony. Life is the medicine. Life is the constant exploration and evolution. So I'm never looking to like arrive somewhere or to get that thing, that box check marked off. It's all this wild, wonderful dance. So anyways, those were the two main staple pieces of it. And, I was also chuckling. I made sure I haven't put this deer necklace on in a long time, but deer medicine, and it also ties into my animal power book. Deer has been, ever since my awakening moment, the first guides from the unseen realms that presented after my intervention were 4 power animals. My core power animal, the black panther, the bear, the frog, and the deer. And those 4 allies kept me alive. Then the deer specifically is heart medicine. And she is gentle yet powerful and teaches to keep your heart open and to not close it down. And so she has been with me all of these years, working in and out of my existence, working energetically, working more physically and profoundly. She wove me into working with sacred medicine, peyote. Kayumari, the sacred blue deer, is the animal medicine for peyote. And it was through a peyote ceremony that Luke and I became a couple.
Okay.
So deer, I highly recommend for anyone who is really, truly wanting to lean into healing your heart. And deep down inside, you do not want to close it off and you want to keep it open, call in deer to be your ally and guide.
Thank you for that piece. So just finishing that thought of you, I'm like hanging on that cliffhanger of, casually, Luke and I, this peyote ceremony, that's how we got together. Can you just give us a little piece about how that came together? Yeah.
And this is a tough one to give a little piece because it's so many dimensions to how this came to be, but I will do my best. So just bear with me on how to most efficiently condense this. So Luke and I had been friends for many years, and we were both doing our inner work. And when we met, we were both celibate. So it was not, quote unquote, the time. And so fast forward,
And I had been called, I had been many years consciously aware that I'm a shaman and on this shamanic path without ever working with a single plant medicine. In fact, I began to like the identity of being a shaman who had never done any, and didn't know if any would ever call to me. And I am a steadfast teacher and never entering into a plant medicine ceremony or experience unless you're truly called. And I just didn't know if that would ever be the case. Well, unexpectedly, I was, and pretty much every single medicine ceremony, it's not a gentle invitation. I'm like shoved into the altar of the ceremony.
Fully get it.
Yeah.
It's always unexpectedly for me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Like I landed at JFK. I don't even remember where I was coming from, got back to my place in Brooklyn. A couple who's no longer a couple, two of my closest friends still, called me. I'm not much a phone person, didn't pick it up, late, just got back from JFK. Then I get a text. I'm like, well, God, this is weird. And they're just like, well, so I FaceTime them. They're like, we feel like you're supposed to be with us. Do you want to come to this ceremony? And I'm like, everything in me, and this goes against my Capricorn organized nature, everything in me said yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, when is it? And they're like, now. You have to pack your bag and get in an Uber and come pick us up. And we're going over to Jersey now. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And so I threw my clothes in a bag. Anyways, it ended up being this incredible peyote experience. So much more to that, but we'll glaze over it for now. And it was very life-changing. And I knew that the resonance, the ancient resonance that I feel for sacred grandfather medicine, which is peyote and grand fire, and just the way the teachers that I have sat with many times in this particular type of ceremony, the honoring way in which they lead and hold space and facilitate, just the entire experience was totally life-changing. And so now, fast forward, I had been called additional times to continue to work with that medicine and honored those calls. Fast forward to Luke telling me, after I said I was going to move to LA, he then unexpectedly told me he had been interested in me. And I was totally caught off guard. And I was a bit speechless. And I was nervous, but agreed to enter into this new exploration. I was nervous about losing him as a friend, but I said yes. Our first date was at a New Year's Eve Kundalini gathering, and my birthday is New Year's Day. And so that was a big decision for me to say yes to that. And while we were there, he said, and during one of the Kundalini breaks, we were sitting across from each other like this, and he said, "Oh, I've been meaning to tell you, I'm going to experience your medicine." And by my medicine, he meant peyote, because he knows that's the one on just the most ancient resonant level that speaks to me. And right away, my discernment kicks in, and I want to know, well, who are you sitting with?
Right.
Like, that's step one. We need to go in depth on this conversation. And he said, well, it's the funniest thing. I was at this store yesterday, and I ran into a guy I've met before named Sanjay. And I was like, hold up.
Yeah.
Because Sanjay is a part of the same community. And so I said, are you sitting with so-and-so?
Yeah.
And he said, yes. And I was like, wow. So the workings of the medicine and the workings of the deer were working without me having to do anything to bring us together. And that's how our Luke and my union has worked the whole way. It's literally not our doing, it's divine's in every capacity. And it's just been such a miracle to witness. So to finish this story, we had a great first date, and I ended up flying back to my place in Brooklyn, and I texted him and said, hey, remind me of the date of the ceremony. I just wanted to hold energetic space. That was it. And he responded, why? Do you want to come? And I was like, do I? I think I do. And I literally had to buy a ticket and get back on a plane the next day or 2 days later to fly back across the country. And so our third date was going out into the desert and in sacred ceremony teepee space. We spent that weekend and back-to-back nights in that medicine space. And it's a funny story, but the medicine showed me 3 things specifically that I needed to bring up to him. And when we got back to the Airbnb, I was like resisting it because they were crunchier topics. They weren't light and fun. And he got out of the shower and I was like, God, I hope he doesn't say he's tired and needs to go to bed, because I had to bring this up. And he gets in the bed and he goes, hey, you didn't share in the sharing circle today. Why not? And I was like, funny you should ask. Because I wasn't going to bring this very personal stuff up in the circle. So I said to him, you know, there are a couple things that I need to address. And I essentially, one of the things, I basically said to him that I didn't feel that he was fully seeing me, and I wasn't sure that he would ever be able to if he wasn't yet. And in that moment, that was the precise moment, because for me, that's the biggest deal. I have to be seen fully on a soul level. And I don't waste any time. Like that age, you know, this was just a year and a half ago or whatever. So I'm already in an age where it's like, I have no time to fuck around, you know? So I'm bringing it up, and this is the biggest piece for me. And it was in his reaction to this that alchemized and changed everything, because he literally, physically and energetically leaned in. He like leaned across my waist area and put his hand on my heart. And well, this is where I was about to generalize and say most men would have gotten defensive, maybe even angry, whatever, and pushed against the subject matter. But he leaned into it and was being tender to my own heart and acknowledging like, wow, this must be a really brave moment for you, and what a vulnerable moment for you to bring this up. And I had never known a man who could come anywhere near that zone of being. I'd only known the complete opposite. So that was the moment for us. And he said, you know, that he later, and I share this because he has shared this publicly, but he in that moment, he was like, oh my God, like it felt almost like an ultimatum to him in that moment.
Understandable.
And, which was not my necessarily intention, but I understand how that could feel. And he said, well, you know, I think that we should give this a go and let's do this, or let's be together. And then I got nervous. And then I was like, wait, you know, like, well, maybe we should sleep on this, you know, one night and let's see how we feel in the morning. And it was this funny little dance. And then the next morning I was sitting out on the couch and he came over and I was like, so, you know, how are you feeling about what we talked about last night? And it was just so beautiful. Like he knelt on his knees and, you know, kneeled before me, and just like, it like intuitively just leaned our third eyes together and just had this profound spiritual moment of deciding, you know, spiritual human being and spiritual human being, like leaning in fully to one another's fullness and trueness and saying yes. And we both determined that we were both feeling the same to say yes to this. And so we became a couple out in the desert, essentially through the medicine instructions of peyote.
Wow. Powerful. I mean, such a testament to the both of you. And we only have so much time to cover all this, but I can feel underneath your words the immensity of the journeys that both of you have been through and the constant initiations that life has thrown both of your ways. It takes one to know one, and I see that and I feel that so immensely. So yeah, again, I just thank you. This story leaves me smiling, and it's a beautiful like cherry on top to what I know has been a painful, rocky journey. And I'm so delighted that, you know, at any age we can find love and we can bust the walls down that we've built around our hearts from being incessantly pelleted with various traumas. And I commend you both for your bravery in literally, physically, and spiritually, emotionally leaning into one another to claim the sacred gift of this union.
Thank you. Yeah, it took both of us, like you said, doing that work. And he, for us, what worked for us is he became a sovereign whole being and I became a sovereign whole being, he on his own, me on my own. And it was at that precise moment that Source brought us together, sovereign being and sovereign being. But yeah, for us to each arrive to those individual sovereign places took a lot of work. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I'm very grateful. It's funny. The biggest message I get whenever I post about us on Instagram or whatever, it's like, you give me hope, or you're posting today gives me the strength to keep the faith, because yeah, he was almost 50 and right. I had just turned 41 on our first date, I guess. And so, yeah, we were on, I guess, the older end of things when we finally aligned in true sacred partnerships. So if it's something that you want, just stay with the work, stay devoted to finding your sovereignty, and it can happen. But it's
Beautiful. A lot. It's a lot. It's always a lot. So in closing this, I want to give you space to talk about your book, Animal Power, that's coming out later this year, I believe in October. And also your recently launched podcast. And if there's any other offerings that are tugging at your heartstrings right now to be shared with this audience, I'd love to hear what you're up to and how we can support what you're working on.
Thanks, Hallie. It's mainly those two things. Yeah, the book, Animal Power, it's my first book. And all I can say is it is the biggest labor of divine love I've ever birthed into this world. It was a mini lifetime journey to getting to this place. And, the animals came to me. I had started writing another book and the animals came to me and requested that I shelve that idea and work with them to continue to be a voice for them in writing this new compendium, which features 100 animals and teaches about each of their unique healing attributes and medicinal powers, and shares messages that each animal has for you, along with the power practice if you feel compelled to deepen your relationship and rapport and continue voyaging forth with that animal. And it shares, 25 personal stories from other leading shamanic and spiritual teachers from all walks of life, from all over the world, all races, colors, genders, ages, none of that matters. It's just all the allness. And, each one sharing about the animal that really changed their life. Or
that's a massive undertaking to compile something of this magnitude. And I just want to commend that first and foremost. Very cool. I could just feel how exhausting that probably has been. So
I'm still recovering.
I feel that for sure. And I remember you sharing some stories at the women's circle that I had about exactly how much of a divine labor of love that it was. And you spoke about working with this artist that you love and all of him doing all of these drawings and the back and forth of that. And then, I hope you don't mind me sharing this piece, but his eventual passing, and he was young, right? He was...
Yeah, just 30 years old. An incredible artist, very treasured artist out of Brazil. His name was William Santiago. Right. And the second I saw his art, for me, it was a very, very make or break part of the whole journey is like the artist.
Right.
Because it cannot be just anyone. The person has to be of a certain essence and energetics, and the animal has to truly embody the teachings in so many different layers and ways.
Yeah.
And the artist, I needed that artist to get that and get the importance of it. And the second I saw his art, I just knew that the vibrancy and the uniqueness and the expression. I was like, this is it. And then once I knew he was it, I then realized he lived in Brazil. And a lot of the foundational medicinal teachings that are held in the living altar that is this Animal Power book is the Eagle Condor prophecy of the energies of the South uniting and harmonizing with the energies of the North, and us coming together to further activate higher consciousness and unity energies for the planet. And so I was like, oh my gosh, by him living in Brazil and me being up here, we're coming together to further activate the prophecy. And so all the pieces came together. And yes, he drew all 100 animals. And yes, eventually, the book it's up for pre-order right now. You can go to my website or go to Amazon or, and get your pre-order on. And if you do, you'll get a complimentary guided shamanic journey for you to connect with your power animal. But the book isn't officially even in anyone's hands yet. And he passed away.
Right. Wasn't it like weeks after finishing the last iteration of the 100th drawing?
Yes.
That is immense. Like that, it feels so, it almost brings me to tears, because it just feels like this was part of his calling to help you bring this through. And I'm not well educated enough on his life and history as an artist, but I'm willing to bet this was one of his bigger endeavors of his career, especially in the latter years. And what a profound gift to leave this planet with. And I know that when I get a copy of this book, I will be holding it differently, knowing the story of this man and your connection to him and all the intention that's gone into it. So that is why I intentionally wanted to bring that piece here to honor him and to honor this profound offering that's being birthed through the energy that the two of you put together.
Thank you. Yeah, as you saw in the new moon gathering when it had just happened, and I just shared in sacred space with you sisters, that it just happened. I mean, you saw the level of grief that was moving through me. It was a very deep and profound yet beautiful experience. His passing has taught me a lot, and perhaps the biggest gift it showed me was the level of our connection, the depth of our connection, that had he not passed, I don't know that I ever would have known was there. Right. So many teachings came in from it. So I honor him and his legacy, and will continue to the best possible way that I can, but absolutely knowing that his last artful creations are held within my book. It's within our book. It changes the game, and it brings alive the book in a completely new and unexpected and potent medicinal way that I of course would have never seen coming. And there's something so beautiful and rich about it, right? And learning about grieving and death and dying. It's such a beautiful portal. And investigating it more and being curious about it, and just knowing that book holds within it, life and death, the illustrator passed and the author is currently living. And, because in shamanism, it's the allness, it's the everything. It's the seeing the beauty and the full polarities and the dualities and the honoring it all. So this book holds all of that.
Thank you so much. And again, I'm really excited for this, because it feels to me like almost like a modern version of Animal Speak, Ted Andrews, but with your own like modern sort of flair and your own essence infused into it. But I love this idea of animals as symbols, just like dream symbology too. Like I believe that these things, these images, these archetypes pop up for us. Like I will see animals. We all see animals if we're paying attention. But I don't believe they're just happenstance crossings. Whenever I can be aware and awake enough, like to take note of what animals are crossing my path, and also what feelings are elicited by that animal. What are the subconscious beliefs I hold around that animal? What are the indigenous peoples saying about that animal, like crow being sacred law and, all of these things. And it's such a fun fun maybe isn't the right word, but it's such a gorgeous supplement to bring into one's spiritual practices and daily rituals.
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And I think even in the Amazon description, I think the word, fun and reverent are in there. It's both. Yeah. It's completely reverent, but it's a fun exploration. There are incredible allies and, I'm so excited for this book to finally be out in the world. It's so beautiful and so rich and so powerful and, honors ancient wisdoms, but it's still very modern. And, oh God, I feel like there's one other thing that's trying to come in on it. And then I know we probably need to close, but I'm just tuning into the book. I feel like it's trying to speak to me. One second.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, it's a great teacher, and it's a book that you can use exactly in the way that you just said. If you notice an animal, you go to Animal Power and open the book and go to that animal's entry and see what the messages are and do the power practice to commune with it more. But it was the other piece of honoring them all. I like leech is one of my favorite animals,
cool.
And leech is in there in my personal story about why I love the leech so much and how I went from fearing it and being creeped out by it to like loving it is written in there.
Cool.
And, tick is in there and it's like, spider and along with dolphin and they're all our beautiful allies.
It's so great to reintroduce ourselves to the truth of a lot of these animals. Like when you said leech, I thought about the practice of like in early medicine, bloodletting.
I've done that a number of times.
Yeah. And like intentionally putting leeches on to suck out blood with this idea of, cleansing or moving energy. And it's like, well, that's cool. That's a piece of leech that most of us are missing. We kind of think of it like these really gross snail-like things that live in stagnant water and we're very afraid of them as a kid and keep salt around so you can, get them off. But there are so many unseen layers to everything in nature, inside ourselves. And overall, I think that's a theme is like to look beyond and underneath whatever the original avatar or apparition is.
Bingo. And I'm not going to name names, but throughout this book writing process, there was input given in to exclude certain beings. And I said, that goes completely against what shamanism is. We do not disconnect and cut off from something that is just because it's uncomfortable.
Right.
We lean in and we explore.
Like when you say certain beings, do you mean certain animals?
Yeah.
Like what animal was being suggested to be excluded?
I think both of the ones I just mentioned were questioned.
Yeah.
The tick and the leech.
Because they're unsightly and they freak people out.
They can evoke uncomfortability.
Yeah.
And evoke, they can evoke a not quote unquote fun feeling or vision. And it's,
that's the kind of shit I want to put in.
Absolutely.
That's what we're here for.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I'm like, that is not an option.
Well, thank you for adhering to what you knew needed to be included. I commend that fully. And that can be really hard when you have pressure of publishers or the powers that be or anything kind of being like, well, this makes this thing more marketable. I mean, in anything, in a course, in an online offering, in how you show up, in a speech that anyone gives. So again, thank you for honoring your truth and sticking to the original insight and keeping things how you knew they needed to be.
Yeah, I did it 100% steadfastly. And that's why I'm so exhausted.
Yeah.
But I did it. And I'm so proud of it.
Good. Well, hopefully it'll be time for a rest for you now. But I want to, in closing, just thank you again so much. We went into so many areas and obviously it was effortless and we probably could have gone plenty more places.
Yeah, I was really
effortlessly.
trying to abbreviate. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to. We like long stories here in the Thought Room. So thank you so much. Where can people find you online? Give your website, your handle again, and your podcast so people can go check that out as well.
Yeah, the podcast is called Ceremony Circle, hosted by me, Alyson Charles. Website is alysoncharles.com, and I spell my name Alyson. And my Instagram handle is still at I am Alyson Charles. And with Ceremony Circle, it's another project that I was really called to do. For years, people were like, you're a radio host. Where's your podcast? I was like, I'm not called to do it. But then it did eventually come in. And it's fun. I have various spiritual and shamanic teachers on there. And at the end of every episode, they guide listeners into a brief guided ritual, ceremony, practice of some sort. So you get immersed with some beautiful, pure energies. So.
Very cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for being the weaver that you are and such an embodied soul and pathwalker, and just your devotion to doing the work and, your invitations of me. Once I moved here, you invited me into your space and to the new moon gathering and then acro yoga, and just, I really appreciate your friendship and, you leaning in.
Thank you.